The morning sun filtered through the tall glass windows of the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. The building buzzed with activity as agents moved briskly, their shoes clicking against the ground. Phones rang in the background and papers shuffled from desk to desk. It was just another busy day at the bureau, or so it seemed. Karoline Leavitt stepped into the lobby, her presence immediately drawing curious glances. She was an unassuming woman in her early 30s, dressed in a plain gray coat and black boots that were scuffed from travel. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and she carried herself with quiet determination. In one hand, she held an old leather briefcase, its edges worn and scratched from years of use. Her other hand clutched the strap of a small shoulder bag. Despite her calm exterior, there was something about her, perhaps the way her fingers trembled slightly on the briefcase, that hinted at nervousness or urgency. She approached the front desk, where a young receptionist sat typing away at a computer. The receptionist looked up, her smile polite but distant. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice professional. "I need to speak with Agent Daniel Carter," Karoline said firmly, though her voice wavered ever so slightly. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Karoline replied, "but it's important, very important." The receptionist hesitated, glancing down at Karoline's briefcase. There was something odd about this visitor, something that didn't quite fit. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Agent Carter is very busy. If you don't have an appointment—" "It's about the disappearances," Karoline interrupted, leaning closer. Her eyes locked onto the receptionist's, and for a moment the room seemed to grow quieter. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. The receptionist froze. Everyone in the bureau knew about the disappearances. Over the past few months, reports had flooded in from small towns across America, families vanishing without a trace, cars abandoned on empty roads, homes left untouched, meals still warm on dining tables. No ransom notes, no signs of struggle, nothing. Just silence. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. After a pause, the receptionist picked up the phone and dialed a number. She spoke softly into the receiver, keeping her gaze fixed on Karoline. When she hung up, she gestured toward a waiting area. "Someone will be with you shortly," she said, her tone clipped but tinged with unease. Karoline nodded and took a seat. As she waited, she opened her briefcase briefly, checking its contents. Inside were folders filled with documents, photographs and strange objects wrapped carefully in cloth. Whatever she carried, it was clear she had gone to great lengths to gather it all. Minutes later, a man appeared in the doorway. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with short brown hair and piercing blue eyes. His suit was crisp and his badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. This was Agent Daniel Carter, known throughout the bureau for his sharp mind and relentless pursuit of answers. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Karoline. "Miss Leavitt?" he asked, approaching her. "Yes," Karoline said, standing quickly. She extended her hand, which Carter shook firmly. "Thank you for seeing me, Agent Carter. You mentioned the disappearances," Carter said, cutting straight to the point. "What do you know about them?" Karoline hesitated, glancing around the crowded lobby. "Not here," she whispered. "We need privacy." Carter studied her face for a moment before nodding. "Follow me." He led her down a series of hallways past offices and conference rooms until they reached a secure door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." After swiping his ID card, he ushered her inside. The room was small but functional, with a table surrounded by chairs. A whiteboard stood against one wall, covered in scribbled notes and maps. Carter closed the door behind them and turned to face Karoline. "All right," he said, crossing his arms. "Talk." Karoline placed her briefcase on the table and opened it. She began laying out its contents, stacks of papers, photographs, and several small objects wrapped in cloth. One by one, she unwrapped the items, revealing fragments of what looked like metallic material. They shimmered faintly under the light, their surfaces smooth yet uneven, almost organic in appearance. "What is this?" Carter asked, picking up one of the fragments. It felt cold to the touch, colder than any metal he'd ever handled. "That's part of why I'm here," Karoline said. She pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a dense forest, trees towering overhead. In the foreground, a group of people stood gathered around something on the ground. Their faces were blurred, but their body language suggested awe or fear. "This was taken 2 weeks ago in northern Wisconsin," Karoline explained. "A local farmer reported seeing strange lights hovering over his property late at night. When he went to investigate, he found these pieces. And then 3 days later, his entire family disappeared." Carter frowned. "Why wasn't this reported sooner?" "It was," Karoline said. But nobody believed him. The sheriff dismissed it as nonsense, and when federal agents arrived, they swept everything under the rug. "I only found out because I've been investigating similar cases for months." She handed him another photograph. This one showed symbols carved into the bark of a tree. The markings were intricate, almost hieroglyphic, and unlike anything Carter had seen before. "These started appearing near every disappearance site," Karoline continued. "At first, I thought they might be some kind of prank or vandalism, but then I realized they're consistent. Every single carving matches the others down to the smallest detail." Carter leaned forward, studying the images closely. Something about them sent a shiver down his spine. "And you think these are connected to the disappearances?" "I don't think," Karoline corrected him. "I know. Look at this." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small digital recorder. Pressing play, she set it on the table, between them. At first, there was only static. Then, faintly, a sound emerged, a low hum, rhythmic and mechanical. Beneath it grew louder, overlapping with another layer of noise. Voices, or at least, something resembling voices. They spoke in a language neither of them recognized, guttural and melodic at the same time. The recording ended abruptly, leaving the room silent once more. Carter stared at the device, his jaw tightening. "Where did you get this?" "From a witness," Karoline said. "A hiker who claims he recorded it near the edge of a lake where 2 campers vanished last month. He barely escaped himself. Said he heard that sound coming from the woods and ran as fast as he could." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what Karoline had brought to the table settled heavily in the air. Finally, Carter broke the silence. "You realize how crazy this sounds, right? Alien abductions, secret messages carved into trees. Most people would laugh you out of the room." "I'm not most people," Karoline said evenly. "And neither are you. That's why I came to you, Agent Carter. You're one of the few who might actually believe me and do something about it." Carter sighed, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to dismiss her claims, to chalk them up to paranoia or delusion. But the evidence sitting in front of him was undeniable. The fragments, the photos, the recording, it all pointed to something far beyond human understanding. "All right," he said finally. "Let's assume for a minute that you're right. What do you want from me?" Karoline met his gaze, her expression resolute. "Help me find the truth, before it's too late." Agent Daniel Carter sat back in his chair, his mind racing as he tried to process everything Karoline Leavitt had shown him. The metallic fragments shimmered faintly on the table between them, their unnatural texture catching the light. The photographs, of strange symbols carved into trees and rocks, were spread out like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. And then there was the audio recording, its eerie hum and distorted voices lingering in his ears long after it had ended. He glanced at Karoline, who was watching him intently. Her hands rested on the edge of the table, fingers drumming softly against the surface. She looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes hinted at sleepless nights. But there was a fierce determination in her gaze that told him she wasn't about to back down. "All right," Carter said finally, breaking the silence. "Let's start from the beginning. How did you get involved in this?" Karoline leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. It started about 6 months ago. I was working on a story about rural communities losing population, small towns fading away because of economic struggles. But then I started hearing whispers about something else. People disappearing without explanation. At first, I thought it was just rumors, local legends blown out of proportion. But the more I dug, the clearer it became that something bigger was happening. She paused, pulling out another folder from her briefcase. Inside were handwritten notes, newspaper clippings, and maps marked with red dots. Every disappearance followed a pattern. Strange lights in the sky, unexplained noises like humming or buzzing, and those symbols. She tapped one of the photographs. They're always left behind, like some kind of calling card. Carter picked up the map, studying the clusters of red dots scattered across different states: Wisconsin, Minnesota, Montana, Oregon, all remote areas far from major cities. And no one's connected these dots before? He asked skeptically. No, Karoline replied. Not officially anyway. Local authorities chalk it up to wild animals, weather phenomena, or even cult activity. Federal agencies send investigators, but they always leave empty-handed, or so they claim. Meanwhile, people keep vanishing and nobody seems to care enough to dig deeper. Carter frowned. He knew how bureaucracy worked. Cases involving missing persons often fell through the cracks unless there was media attention or political pressure. But this felt different. There was too much detail, too much consistency in Karoline's findings for it to be coincidence. What about these fragments? He asked, picking up one of the metallic shards. Where exactly did you find them? They weren't all found by me, Karoline admitted. Some came from witnesses willing to talk, others from abandoned sites where disappearances occurred. A few I acquired through less official means. She hesitated, avoiding his eyes for a moment. I know it sounds reckless, but I didn't have time to wait for permission slips. Carter raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Whatever risks she'd taken to gather this evidence, it had paid off. These fragments were unlike anything he'd ever seen. They seemed both manufactured and organic, their surfaces smooth yet uneven, almost alive. If they really were alien in origin, and that was still a big if, they could change everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. As if reading his thoughts, Karoline added, I sent samples to a lab once hoping for answers, but the results came back inconclusive. The material doesn't match any known element on Earth. It's not metal, not plastic, not anything we can identify. Carter set the fragment down carefully, his mind spinning with possibilities. If what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying I believe you yet, then whoever or whatever is behind these disappearances has access to technology far beyond ours. Which begs the question, why haven't they made contact? Why take people instead of talking to us? That's the part I don't understand either, Karoline admitted. But I think the answer lies in those symbols. They're everywhere, Agent Carter. Every single site where someone vanished has them. And based on the patterns, I think they're trying to communicate. Communicate what? Carter asked, leaning back in his chair. We come in peace, or run for your lives? Karoline gave him a small, humorless smile. I wish I knew. But here's the thing. I don't think we're dealing with just one group. There are rumors, whispers really, about shadowy figures showing up in these towns after the disappearances. Men in suits asking questions, confiscating evidence, intimidating anyone who talks too loudly. Whoever they are, they don't want the truth getting out. Carter's expression darkened. You're telling me there's a cover-up? Inside the government? I'm not accusing anyone specifically, Karoline said quickly. But yes, it feels that way. Every lead I follow hits a wall, files go missing, witnesses suddenly change their stories. And now... She trailed off, glancing toward the door as though expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Now what? Carter prompted. Now I've been threatened, she admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. Twice. Anonymous calls telling me to stop digging. The last one said if I kept going, I'd end up like the others. A chill ran down Carter's spine. Threats weren't uncommon in his line of work, but coming from unknown sources and tied to disappearances, it was impossible to ignore. "Did you report them?" Karoline shook her head. "Who would I report them to? Whoever's behind this clearly has reach. I couldn't risk tipping them off that I'm onto something." Carter nodded slowly, understanding her caution. Still, the situation was escalating faster than he'd anticipated. If Karoline's fears were justified, she might already be in danger. And if word got out that the FBI was investigating, things could spiral out of control. "We need to bring this upstairs," he said finally, "but carefully. If there's a leak, if someone inside the bureau is involved, we can't trust just anyone." Karoline looked relieved, though tension lingered in her posture. "Thank you. I didn't know who else to turn to." Before Carter could respond, there was a knock at the door. Both of them turned sharply as it opened, revealing Agent Laura Bennett. She was a tall woman in her 40s, with sharp features and an air of authority that commanded respect. Her arms were crossed, and her expression was unreadable. "Daniel," she said coolly, "mind telling me why I just heard reports of a civilian bringing classified materials into the building?" Carter stood, stepping between Bennett and Karoline. "Laura, this isn't what it looks like. We're reviewing potential evidence related to ongoing cases. Nothing actionable yet." Bennett's gaze shifted to Karoline, who instinctively closed her briefcase. "Is that so? Because rumors are spreading fast. Some agents seem to think we've got a conspiracy theorist on our hands." Karoline bristled at the term but held her tongue. Carter shot Bennett a warning look. "With all due respect, Laura, I'll handle this my way. For now it's contained." Bennett studied him for a moment longer before turning her attention back to Karoline. "Miss Leavitt, is it? You should know that sensationalism won't get you far here. If you're wasting our time—" "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." "Sure," Karoline interrupted, her voice firm despite the tension in the room. "People are dying, Agent Bennett. Disappearing. Someone needs to care." Bennett's lips tightened, but she didn't argue further. Instead, she gave Carter a pointed, "Look, keep me updated, and make sure this stays quiet. The last thing we need is panic." When she left, closing the door behind her, the room felt smaller somehow. Karoline exhaled deeply, slumping slightly in her chair. "Well, that went better than expected." Carter chuckled dryly. "Trust me, it's not over yet. Laura's skeptical, but she's also thorough. If she smells even a hint of trouble, she'll shut us down." "She won't," Karoline said confidently. "Because deep down she knows something's wrong, just like you do." Carter didn't respond right away. Instead, he began gathering the materials on the table, sliding them back into Karoline's briefcase. "For now, let's focus on next steps. I'll need copies of everything you've got, and I'll arrange protective detail for you. You're not safe out there alone." Karoline nodded gratefully. "What about the symbols? Can we analyze them further?" "I'll put a team on it," Carter promised. "Linguists, cryptographers, anyone who might crack the code. In the meantime, stay close. Don't go anywhere without letting me know." As they finished packing up, Carter couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something massive. Whether it was salvation or disaster remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The disappearances weren't random. Something, or someone, was watching, and they were running out of time to figure out why. The next morning, Agent Daniel Carter arrived at the FBI headquarters earlier than usual. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale orange glow over the city. He carried a cup of coffee in one hand and a folder tucked under his arm. Inside the folder were copies of Karoline Leavitt's evidence, photographs, notes, and detailed descriptions of the mysterious symbols. His mind was already racing with questions as he made his way to his office. When he opened the door, he found Karoline sitting there, waiting for him. She looked exhausted but alert, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting trouble. On the table in front of her was her now familiar leather briefcase, along with a laptop open to a map filled with red dots marking disappearance sites. "You're here early," Carter said, closing the door behind him. "So are you," Karoline replied, giving him a small smile. I couldn't sleep, too much on my mind. Carter nodded, setting his coffee down and taking a seat across from her. Me neither. I spent half the night going over your files. Those symbols, they're consistent, almost mathematical. Whoever made them knows what they're doing. Karoline leaned forward, her expression serious. That's what worries me. If these symbols are some kind of language or code, then whoever's using them is trying to send a message. But why leave it carved into trees and rocks? Why not just talk to us directly? It could be a test, Carter suggested. Maybe they're gauging our ability to understand them before making contact. Or maybe they don't trust us, Karoline countered. If they've been watching us for years or even decades, they might see us as unpredictable, dangerous even. Carter frowned, considering her words. It was a chilling thought. Beings from another world observing humanity, deciding whether we were worth saving or destroying. But there was no proof yet that aliens were involved. For all they knew, this could still be some advanced human experiment gone horribly wrong. Before either of them could say more, there was a knock at the door. A young agent named Ryan Mitchell stepped inside, holding a thin file. Agent Carter, sorry to interrupt. We ran an analysis on those audio recordings you sent over. Thought you'd want to see the results. Carter gestured for him to come in. What did you find? Ryan hesitated, glancing at Karoline before continuing. It's strange. The sounds match no known language or dialect. But when we isolated certain frequencies, we picked up something unusual, patterns that resemble binary code. Karoline's eyes widened. Binary code? Like computer language? Exactly, Ryan confirmed. It's fragmented, though. Not enough to decode fully, but it suggests whoever or whatever is behind this has knowledge of technology far beyond ours. Carter thanked Ryan and dismissed him, his mind racing. Binary code implied intelligence, planning, and possibly communication. But who was sending the message, and why? He turned back to Karoline. This changes things. If these signals are deliberate, then we're dealing with something intentional, not random disappearances but calculated actions. Karoline nodded grimly. Which means we're running out of time. Whatever they're planning, it's coming soon. Later that day, tensions began to rise within the Bureau. Word of Karoline's findings had spread faster than Carter had anticipated. Whispers echoed through the hallways, blending paranoia with speculation. Some agents dismissed the case as nonsense, while others grew increasingly uneasy. Among the skeptics was Agent Laura Bennett, who wasted no time confronting Carter. "You're really chasing this alien abduction theory?" she asked, cornering him in the break room. Her tone was sharp, laced with disbelief. "It's not a theory," Carter replied evenly. "We have physical evidence, audio recordings, symbols left at every site. You can't explain that away as coincidence." Bennett crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. "And what about Miss Leavitt? What makes her so special? She's a journalist, Daniel, not a scientist or investigator. How do we know she's not fabricating half of this?" "She's not," Carter shot back. "Everything checks out. The fragments, the locations, the patterns, it's all real." Bennett sighed, shaking her head. "Even if it is, you're playing with fire. People will start asking questions, reporters, politicians. Do you really want to risk exposing classified operations because of some wild goose chase?" "It's not a goose chase," Carter insisted. "Something's happening out there, Laura. Something big. And if we ignore it, we're failing our duty to protect this country." Bennett studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "Just be careful, Daniel. If this blows up in your face, don't expect me to clean up the mess." As she walked away, Carter felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew Bennett wasn't entirely wrong. Pushing too hard, too fast, could jeopardize everything. But pulling back now would mean abandoning the truth, and potentially putting lives at risk. That evening, Carter and Karoline decided to take matters into their own hands. They enlisted the help of a trusted linguist, Dr. Emily Grant, who specialized in ancient languages and cryptography. She agreed to meet them after hours in a secure conference room. Dr. Grant examined the photographs of the symbols closely, her brow furrowed in concentration. After several minutes, she spoke. These aren't random carvings. They follow a specific structure, almost like a cipher. Each symbol represents a concept or idea, but without context, it's impossible to translate accurately. What kind of concepts? Karoline asked eagerly. Dr. Grant hesitated. Some seem to relate to movement, directions perhaps. Others appear to represent time or cycles. There's also a recurring motif that resembles warning signs. A warning? Carter repeated, his voice tense. About what? I don't know, Dr. Grant admitted, but if I had to guess, it's tied to the disappearances. Maybe they're trying to tell us something important, something urgent. As the meeting wrapped up, Carter thanked Dr. Grant and promised to keep her updated. When she left, he turned to Karoline. We need to connect the dots. If these symbols are warnings, then where are they pointing? What's the end game? Karoline pulled out her laptop again, opening a satellite image of northern Wisconsin. This is where the most recent disappearance occurred. The symbols were found near a lake surrounded by dense forest. If we go there, maybe we'll find answers. Carter hesitated. Going into the field was risky, especially with so many unknowns, but staying behind felt worse. All right, he said finally. We'll assemble a team and head out tomorrow night, but we move quietly. No official clearance, no paper trail. By midnight, the preparations were underway. Carter gathered a small group of trusted agents, including Ryan Mitchell, who volunteered despite his lack of field experience. They packed equipment carefully, ensuring nothing would raise suspicion. Meanwhile, Karoline reviewed every scrap of information she'd collected, determined not to miss a single detail. As they prepared to leave, Carter noticed Karoline staring at her reflection in a window. Her face was pale, her expression haunted. You okay? He asked gently. She turned to him, forcing a smile. Just thinking about how much rides on this. If we're wrong, if this turns out to be nothing, I don't know what I'll do. We're not wrong, Carter said firmly. Whatever's out there, it's real, and we're going to find it. With that, they climbed into an unmarked van and set off into the darkness, heading toward the remote woods of Wisconsin. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and mystery, but one thing was clear. They were closer than ever to uncovering the truth and facing whatever awaited them in the shadows. The drive to northern Wisconsin was long and tense. The unmarked van rattled over uneven roads as Agent Daniel Carter navigated through the dark, dense forest. Inside, the small team sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Karoline Leavitt stared out the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she watched the trees blur past. Ryan Mitchell adjusted his equipment nervously, while another agent, Sarah Dawson, checked her weapon for what felt like the 100th time. As they approached the edge of the lake where the most recent disappearance had occurred, the atmosphere grew heavier. The air smelled damp and earthy, and the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the water. It was beautiful, but also unsettling. Carter parked the van a short distance away from the site, careful not to draw attention. All right, he said, turning off the engine. We move quietly. Stick together, stay alert. If anything feels off, let me know immediately. Everyone nodded, grabbing flashlights and backpacks before stepping out into the cool night air. The ground beneath their feet was soft with moss and fallen leaves, muffling their footsteps as they made their way toward the lake. Karoline led the group, consulting a map on her phone to ensure they were heading in the right direction. After about 20 minutes of walking, they reached the spot where the symbols had been found. The carvings were faint but unmistakable, etched into the bark of several large trees surrounding a clearing. Karoline knelt down, running her fingers over the grooves. These are fresh, she murmured. Whoever, or whatever, made them, was here recently. Carter scanned the area, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Spread out. Look for anything unusual. Tracks, disturbances, anything that might tell us more. The team fanned out, searching methodically. Sarah stayed close to Carter, her hand resting on her gun while Ryan examined the ground for signs of activity. Karoline wandered slightly ahead, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. As she moved deeper into the woods, her flashlight caught something glinting in the underbrush. She crouched down, brushing away dirt and leaves to reveal a small metallic object. Another fragment, similar to the ones she'd shown Carter earlier. "Daniel," she called softly, holding it up. "Over here." Carter jogged over, taking the fragment from her hands. He turned it over in his palm, examining its strange texture. "This confirms it," he said grimly. "Whatever's happening, it's tied to these pieces." Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the air, a sound so faint it was almost imperceptible at first. But within seconds, it grew louder, vibrating through the ground and making their teeth chatter. The team froze, exchanging uneasy glances. "What is that?" Ryan whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Carter replied, gripping his flashlight tightly. "But we need to find out." The source of the noise became clear moments later when a blinding light erupted from above, illuminating the entire clearing. Everyone shielded their eyes as a massive triangular craft descended silently from the sky, hovering just above the treetops. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the moonlight in mesmerizing patterns. There were no visible engines or thrusters. It simply floated, defying all logic. Karoline gasped, clutching Carter's arm. "It's real," she breathed. "It's actually real." The craft emitted another pulse of light, this one accompanied by a deep, resonant tone that seemed to echo inside their skulls. For a moment, time itself felt distorted, as though reality had shifted ever so slightly. Then, without warning, the craft began moving again, drifting slowly toward the center of the lake. "We have to follow it," Karoline said urgently, already heading in that direction. "Wait," Carter grabbed her shoulder, pulling her back. "We don't know what it wants. It could be dangerous. But this is why we're here," she argued. "If we lose sight of it now, we'll never get another chance." Reluctantly, Carter agreed. Keeping a safe distance, the team followed the craft's path along the shore of the lake. The humming grew louder as they approached an abandoned military outpost hidden among the trees. The building was old and dilapidated, its walls covered in ivy and graffiti. A rusted sign hung crookedly above the entrance. "Restricted area. No trespassing." "This wasn't on the maps," Sarah muttered, peering into the darkness. "It must have been decommissioned years ago," Carter replied. "But why would the craft lead us here?" There was only one way to find out. Drawing their weapons, the team cautiously entered the structure. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Broken furniture littered the floor, and faded posters lined the walls. But as they moved deeper into the facility, they realized it wasn't entirely abandoned. Strange machinery hummed softly in the background, glowing faintly with an otherworldly blue light. In the center of the largest room stood a containment chamber, a cylindrical tank filled with a translucent liquid. Suspended within it was a humanoid figure, its features obscured by the fluid. Long limbs, smooth skin, and oversized eyes hinted at something alien, yet eerily familiar. "Oh my God," Ryan whispered, lowering his flashlight. "Is that alive?" Before anyone could answer, alarms blared throughout the building, startling them. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Heavy footsteps echoed outside, growing closer with each passing second. "They're here," Carter said sharply, motioning for everyone to take cover. "Get ready." Seconds later, armed men in black tactical gear stormed into the room. Their faces were obscured by helmets, and their movements were precise and disciplined. One of them stepped forward, raising a hand to signal the others to hold their fire for now. "Drop your weapons," he commanded, his voice muffled but authoritative. "You're trespassing on restricted property." Carter exchanged a glance with Karoline, who looked terrified but defiant. Slowly, he lowered his gun, signaling for the rest of the team to do the same. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What is this place?" The man ignored him, instead barking orders to his team. Two of them approached the containment chamber, inspecting it carefully. Meanwhile, the rest surrounded Carter and his group, ensuring they couldn't escape. Karoline, unable to stay silent, spoke up. That thing in the tank. It's connected to the disappearances, isn't it? What are you hiding? The leader turned to face her, tilting his head slightly as if studying her. You shouldn't have come here, he said coldly. Now you'll have to live with the consequences. Before anyone could react, the creature inside the chamber suddenly stirred. Its eyes snapped open, glowing with an intense white light. A surge of energy pulsed outward, knocking everyone off their feet. Lights flickered, machines sparked, and the entire facility shook violently. When the chaos subsided, the room was plunged into darkness. The armed men were gone, leaving behind only silence and confusion. Carter groaned, struggling to sit up. His head throbbed and his vision swam as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Everyone okay? He asked, his voice hoarse. One by one, his team responded, though none sounded particularly steady. Karoline crawled over to him, her face pale but resolute. What do we do now? She asked. Carter hesitated, looking toward the containment chamber. Whatever had been inside was gone, leaving only empty liquid behind. We go back, he said, finally, and figure out who those men were and why they didn't want us to see the truth. As they regrouped and prepared to leave, Carter couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled onto something far bigger than any of them had imagined. The creature, the symbols, the disappearances, it all pointed to a secret buried deep within the shadows of history, and whoever was protecting it wasn't going to let them dig much deeper. But as they trudged back through the forest, battered and bruised but still determined, one thing was certain. The truth was out there. And they weren't giving up until they found it. The ride back to FBI headquarters was quiet and heavy with tension. The team sat in silence, their minds replaying the events of the night over and over again. Agent Daniel Carter drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he navigated the dark roads. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes darted constantly between the road and the rearview mirror, half expecting headlights to appear behind them at any moment. But the road remained empty. Karoline Leavitt sat in the passenger seat staring out the window. Her face was pale, her expression distant. She kept replaying the image of the creature in her mind, the glowing eyes, the smooth skin, the way it had seemed both fragile and powerful at the same time. What had it been trying to do? Why had it reacted so violently? And most importantly, what did it mean for humanity? In the back seat, Ryan Mitchell and Sarah Dawson exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of them spoke, but their thoughts were clear. They had just witnessed something that defied all logic and reason. The military men who had stormed the facility, the strange machinery, the alien figure suspended in liquid. It was too much to process. Both agents felt a mix of fear and awe, unsure whether they should feel relieved or terrified. When they finally arrived at headquarters, the sun was beginning to rise. The building was eerily quiet, its halls deserted except for a few night shift workers. Carter led the group to a secure conference room, locking the door behind them. He turned to face the others, his voice low but firm. We need to figure out what happened back there, and fast. For the next several hours, the team pieced together fragments of what they had seen. They reviewed photos taken during their investigation, analyzed the symbols carved into the trees, and tried to make sense of the audio recordings they had brought with them. Every detail felt like a puzzle piece, but the bigger picture remained, frustratingly unclear. Karoline spread out her notes on the table, her hands trembling slightly. Those men, they weren't regular soldiers, she said. Their gear, their tactics, it's like they've been trained to handle situations exactly like this. Whoever they are, they're prepared for encounters with extraterrestrial life. Carter nodded grimly. Which means someone knows more than they're letting on. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Those disappearances we've been investigating, they're not random. There's a pattern, a purpose. But what is it? Ryan asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Are they abducting people? Experimenting on them? Or is it something else entirely? I don't think they're hostile, Karoline said slowly, choosing her words carefully. At least not the creatures themselves. Think about it. The symbols, the binary code in the audio recordings, even the way that thing reacted when we found it. It wasn't attacking us, it was defending itself. Maybe it was trying to communicate. Sarah frowned. Communicate what? Stay away? Help us? We still don't know anything for sure. That's why we need to decode the symbols, Carter interrupted. If those markings are warnings or instructions, we can't afford to ignore them. Emily Grant said they might represent directions or cycles. Maybe they're pointing us towards something important. Karoline's eyes lit up. What if they're coordinates? Not just physical locations, but timelines, patterns of movement. If we map them correctly, maybe we can predict where the next event will happen. Carter considered this for a moment before nodding. It's worth a shot. Let's get everything we've got to Dr. Grant and see if she can crack it. Meanwhile, tensions within the Bureau were escalating. Word of the team's unauthorized mission had leaked and rumors spread like wildfire. Some agents whispered about government conspiracies, while others dismissed the story as nonsense. Among the skeptics was Agent Laura Bennett, who wasted no time confronting Carter in his office. You went rogue, she accused, slamming a file onto his desk. No clearance, no oversight. You put lives at risk, Daniel. What were you thinking? We didn't have a choice, Carter replied, his voice calm but firm. Whatever's happening out there, it's bigger than us. Bigger than this agency. People are disappearing, Laura. Entire families. Someone needs to step up and find answers. And you think breaking protocol is the way to do it? Bennett snapped. You're playing with fire. If this gets out, if reporters catch wind of what you're doing, it'll be chaos, panic. Do you want that on your conscience? Carter leaned forward, meeting her gaze steadily. I'd rather deal with panic than let innocent people vanish without a fight. If you're so worried about exposure, then help me contain it. Work with us instead of against us. Bennett hesitated, her expression softening slightly. For a moment, she looked almost sympathetic. You're walking a dangerous line, Daniel. Just be careful. If anyone finds out how deep this goes. She trailed off, shaking her head. I hope you know what you're doing. By mid-afternoon, Dr. Emily Grant joined the team in the secure conference room. She carried a laptop filled with new analyses of the symbols and audio recordings. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. I think I've cracked part of it, she said, setting the laptop on the table. The symbols aren't just warnings, they're instructions, coordinates like you suspected. But they're not just pointing to physical locations. They're marking points in time. Specific moments when something significant will happen. Significant how? Carter asked. Emily hesitated, glancing at the screen. I don't know, for sure. But based on the patterns, I think they're connected to celestial events, alignments of planets, solar flares, things like that. It's like whoever left these symbols is timing their actions according to cosmic cycles. Karoline's heart raced as she studied the map displayed on the laptop. Red dots marked disappearance, sites each one aligning perfectly with upcoming astronomical phenomena. This is it, she whispered. This is the key. If we can predict where and when the next event will occur, we can stop it, or at least prepare. Carter nodded, his mind racing. We'll need to act quickly, alert local authorities, set up surveillance teams, whatever it takes. But we also need to keep this under wraps. If word gets out, we'll handle it, Karoline said firmly. We have to. That evening, as the team worked tirelessly to finalize their plans, Karoline received an anonymous message on her phone. It was short and cryptic. You've seen enough. Stop now. Her hands trembled as she showed it to Carter. They're watching us, she said quietly. Whoever sent this, they know we're close. Carter's jaw tightened. Then we're running out of time. Whoever's behind this doesn't want the truth to come out. We need to expose everything, now. Together, they compiled all the evidence they had gathered. Photographs, recordings, decoded symbols, and predictions of future events. Karoline uploaded everything to a secure server, creating a digital archive that could be accessed by trusted journalists and researchers. Then, taking a deep breath, she published a summary online, revealing the existence of the disappearances, the symbols, and the mysterious craft. Within hours, the internet exploded with reactions. Some dismissed the claims as conspiracy theories, while others demanded immediate answers from world leaders. Governments scrambled to respond, issuing vague statements and denying involvement. Meanwhile, reports began flooding in from around the globe. Strange lights in the sky, unexplained noises, and sightings of metallic objects hovering silently above remote areas. As chaos erupted worldwide, Carter and Karoline stood side by side, watching news broadcasts unfold on a small TV in the conference room. Their faces were weary but resolute. They had done what they could to warn humanity, but whether it would be enough remained to be seen. "What happens now?" Karoline asked softly, her voice barely audible over the noise of the television. Carter sighed, rubbing his temples. "Now, we wait, and hope we gave people enough time to prepare." Outside the window, the city skyline shimmered under the fading light. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the stars twinkled faintly, indifferent to the turmoil below. Humanity stood on the brink of discovery or destruction. Only time would tell which path lay ahead.